And a phase 3 trial is where we actually take a group of women affected by ovarian cancer, and half of those women would receive the standard treatment that we use today, and half of those women would receive the new treatment. Sometimes the new treatment is just the standard treatment plus addition of another approach or another drug or another intervention. Sometimes it's completely different. But the idea behind that, and this is fairly important because it's the most common type of clinical trial that we conduct in Canada, is that we're comparing the standard treatment to the new treatment. And at the end of a period of time, that may be a year, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, which of those two treatments seems to have the better results? So that with that, it is very important that there is a process of what we call randomization, because if, as practitioners, we just selected women to say this person should go in this group and this person should go in the other group, the possibility exists that there was some reason that caused us to make that selection, or what we call bias, and therefore when the results become available, they may be unrelated to the new drug. It was just because the bias of the practitioner caused more women that had a better outcome to be in one group than another. So randomization means that after an informed consent has been provided, that women would be randomly allocated to either Group A or Group B, and that it is not based upon any bias of the practitioner or even at the wish of the patient. So that consent to be randomized to either one of those two study arms or two arms of a study is critically important to understand, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that. There is another category of drugs called phase 4 trials, and that's largely related to long-term impact. Very often after a drug's been approved and is on the market, it will go into a phase 4 study which looks at outcomes, anything from effectiveness to cost analysis and so on, and that's more commonly done in the community setting. So that's the types of clinical trials that we look at. We don't always go phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, but generally that's the pattern that a new intervention would occur with. So some persons would say, well, why should I even consider participating in a clinical trial? What's in it for me? And if one looks at that, first and foremost, very often participation in a clinical trial provides the chances of accessing new approaches that may not be available in any other way other than through the clinical trial. And very often that does involve new drugs. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily better, but the data to date would suggest that they likely are better, and that that's an opportunity to access that new approach. Possibility exists that the new approach could even be better than the standard approach, but we won't know that unless we actually generate that information. It usually means that women participating in clinical trial have the benefit and full access to the complete care team of the nurses that are involved in the clinical trial, the very often social workers, pharmacists, and so on. And although that may occur even with standard treatment, there's a very rigorous protocol, as I commented on earlier, to make sure all of those elements are considered in the conduct of that clinical trial. So that there's certainly the possibility that that individual woman would actually benefit from the new intervention or from participating in the trial, but also at the end of the day, it provides us with new information to broadly impact on the treatment of women affected by ovarian cancer. So there's multiple reasons or multiple benefits related to participation in clinical trials. Perhaps before I conclude, just one other comment that I'll make is that many persons say, well, what does it cost? How does one participate in a clinical trial? Who pays for this? So first and foremost, patients do not pay to participate in clinical trials. This is provided as a component of their health care, although some clinical trials may well be supported by the sponsoring institution, such as the National Cancer Institute of Canada, such as the NCI US, such as Princess Margaret Hospital. There are some trials that are coordinated by those groups, that are supported by industry partners. It may be that there's a new drug that is being developed by a particular industry partner, and that company is interested in supporting further inquiry or generating new knowledge about that particular drug. There's a variety of different ways, but that does not affect the coverage or the actual person in terms of the cost of the trial. And then finally, what I might do is just suggest by way of resources that there are multiple resources that are available for women considering clinical trials. Ovarian Cancer Canada does have resources available. The Clinical Trials Group does have resources available on the website for potential participants. The NCI US has a very rich source of information available for practitioners and for persons affected by cancer that details out a lot of these issues. So I would encourage you to seek information, speak with your practitioner, and make sure that you have access to the information that you need. Now, having said all of that, I think it's really important to recognize that clinical trials are always provided by a team. There may be a doctor that you see in the office or whatever else, but in that team, one of the key components and one of the persons that very often you'll see more than anybody else is the nurse on the team, on the healthcare team that is directly involved with those clinical trials. So I'm delighted that my colleague Monica Bacon, who's had a broad experience across both providing care and coordinating clinical trials, is also on this telephone education program with me. And with that, I'll be quiet and ask Monica to, she'll probably wish to correct all the things I said.
Well, hello to all of you, and it is also a pleasure for me to be able to join you today. And actually, Dr. Stewart isn't right. I do not have a lot of corrections to say. In fact, I can't add very much at all to all of the information, the thorough information that he has already provided. There are one or two points that I would like to elaborate on with you. When Dr. Stewart was explaining to you about the research ethics committees, research ethics boards at each cancer center, which would review these clinical trials before they would be accepted for use at the cancer center. I wanted to let you know that actually even before that, there is a national review, and any clinical trials conducted in Canada go to Health Canada for investigational agent approval and for review of the entire protocol. As Dr. Stewart mentioned, the protocol being the document which completely describes the conduct for the study. Only if these protocols get approved by Health Canada, they move on to the local level for then local research ethics approval. And this is an ongoing process, so that if there is a change to the study during its activity, it also has to be approved both nationally and locally by research ethics committees on your behalf. Another thing that Dr. Stewart mentioned when he was describing to you the reasons for eligibility and exclusion criteria for people to be able to participate in these studies, I hope you got the connection when he later spoke about phase 1 and phase 2 studies. So these new agents that have actually passed their testing at the laboratory level moved on to phase 1 testing for safety and phase 2 testing for effectiveness against a certain kind of cancer, will have shown during that early testing things that would make them perhaps unsafe or ineffective. And it's those findings that cause the lack of safety or effectiveness which are used to establish then the eligibility or exclusion criteria for the larger eventual phase 3 evaluation trial. so that we have learned early on certain characteristics that may exist in people who may have ovarian cancer but may have other characteristics which makes this agent either unsafe or ineffective, and so therefore that would help establish whether they should even join in the later, larger study.